I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
Princess Anne had entered the private archive, expecting to settle a routine question about the late Queen's personal papers. Instead, she found an envelope bearing Prince George's name, sealed in Elizabeth's unmistakable hand, and hidden inside a locked dispatch box connected to Camilla. The discovery did not merely revive a dead monarch's voice. It exposed a decision someone inside the palace had made to keep that voice from reaching the future king. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne began searching after George recalled that his great-grandmother had promised him guidance. At Windsor, she opened boxes of Queen Elizabeth II's private correspondence and studied the archive register, the official record showing where royal documents were stored. One entry described a sealed letter addressed to the prince, yet the envelope was absent. That mattered because George was not merely a grieving great-grandson. He was a child, being prepared for a future in which duty could overpower identity. Anne followed the reference to a locked red dispatch box, a secure case used for confidential royal papers. The box stood among Camilla's private household files. Inside, beneath documents, lay Elizabeth's letter to George. Someone had removed it from its intended collection and placed it where neither William nor Catherine would search. Anne read the opening lines alone. Her expression hardened when the monarch's wishes became clear. She had entrusted her daughter, not the queen consort, to deliver the message when George was ready. Elizabeth urged the boy to guard his character against palace ambition, remain close to his parents, and seek Anne whenever royal responsibility felt heavier than family love. The words made the Princess Royal responsible for protecting him from the pressure surrounding his destiny. A handwritten transfer note deepened the betrayal. It showed that the envelope had been moved shortly after Charles became king, but the authorizing signature had been scratched away. Anne closed the box, took the letter, and ordered the archive room sealed. When an aide asked whether the monarch should be warned, she answered that Camilla would hear from her first. Anne entered the queen consort's office, placed the envelope before the private secretary, and said, "Tell her I found what she buried." Camilla did not ask what she meant. She cancelled her next engagement and demanded a meeting with no Charles, no William, and no advisor present. But before the two women faced each other, the hidden letter forced the palace to confront a more dangerous question. Why had Elizabeth placed George's future in Anne's hands? And what exactly had Camilla feared he would discover? The letter connected four people who stood at very different points in the royal story. George was the child expected to carry the crown. Anne was the daughter who had spent a lifetime defending it. Camilla was the woman still fighting to secure her place within it. And William was the father who suddenly learned that someone had interfered with the final words his grandmother had written for his son. George had already begun to feel his childhood changing. Public appearances carried more meaning, private lessons grew more serious, and every adult around him seemed to know where his life was heading before he did. The crown, meaning the institution and responsibilities attached to the monarch, was no longer a distant symbol. It was becoming the future waiting for him. Elizabeth had understood that weight better than anyone. She had written not as sovereign to heir, but as a great-grandmother trying to protect a boy who might one day feel trapped by duty. Anne felt the betrayal deeply. The late queen had given her a final responsibility, yet someone had blocked her from carrying it out, and allowed George to believe the promised message had never existed. When she privately showed William the envelope, he did not raise his voice. He gripped the back of a chair, stared at his son's name, and asked how long Camilla's household had possessed something written for his child. The prince's anger remained controlled, but the silence around each word made it more dangerous. Catherine feared what the truth could do to George. She understood why William wanted answers, yet she worried that revealing the concealment too quickly might make their son distrust every adult responsible for protecting him. The princess also knew that hiding the truth again would repeat the same mistake. George needed honesty, but he needed it without being dragged into a battle created by fear, rank, and resentment. Anne then showed William the line that removed all doubt. Elizabeth had used a private phrase, known only to her and George, proving the message had been written personally, rather than dictated through a secretary. The letter also warned that some people might present control as protection and influence as guidance, though the monarch named no one directly. William understood the danger immediately. Someone had decided that those words were too powerful for his son to receive. William sat beside George that evening and carefully asked whether he remembered his final, private conversation with the Queen. The boy paused, then answered, "Your heart must grow before your title does." The prince felt his anger turn cold. The exact sentence appeared inside the hidden letter. Elizabeth had meant George to receive it. Its disappearance had never been an innocent mistake. The emotional stakes were now unmistakable, yet the confrontation could not be understood without returning to the precise moment when George's innocent memory set Anne on the path toward the locked dispatch box. Months before the letter was found, George had spoken a sentence that unsettled Anne more than he realized. During a quiet family gathering, he asked when he would receive the message his great-grandmother had promised him. The adults around the table fell silent. Camilla lowered her eyes. Charles changed the subject. Anne said nothing then, but she remembered every reaction, and that single moment became the trigger that eventually shattered the palace calm. George had asked the question during a private luncheon at Windsor, marking the anniversary of Elizabeth's passing. Charles, Camilla, Anne, William, and Catherine had gathered with him to share memories that were meant to bring comfort. Windsor was more than a royal residence. It was one of the monarchy's historic homes and a place closely tied to the late Queen's final years. That connection made the boy's question impossible to dismiss as childish imagination. George explained that Elizabeth had spoken to him alone during one of their final meetings. She had promised to leave written guidance for the day royal life began to feel frightening. William looked at his son with shock, because no one had ever told him such a message existed. Catherine watched the hope in the boy's face and understood that he had been waiting quietly, afraid that asking sooner might seem selfish. Camilla set down her glass. She told George that grief could blur memories and make old conversations feel more certain than they were. Her voice remained calm, but Anne heard the firmness beneath it. The Princess Royal also saw the discomfort the Queen Consort tried to hide. George lowered his eyes, and in that small movement, he seemed to question whether the promise had ever been real. Charles quickly moved the conversation elsewhere. Later, Anne stopped her brother in a quiet corridor and asked whether their mother had left correspondence for George. Royal correspondence meant private letters and written instructions preserved within palace records. The king answered that no such document had appeared among the papers presented to him. His confusion felt genuine, and that disturbed her even more. Anne requested the archival inventory, the official list used to track stored royal documents. Buried inside it was a coded entry, G.W.C. Personal, Delayed Delivery. The initials matched George William Charles, while the description referred to a sealed family letter. The record proved that the message had existed, even as the boy had been encouraged to doubt himself. An archive clerk finally admitted that the envelope had been moved shortly after Charles's accession, the formal moment when he became king. The instruction had come from Camilla's office, delivered by hand and marked, "Not for the king's review." Anne remembered George's wounded silence at lunch. Someone powerful had hidden the truth, because the truth had become inconvenient. The luncheon had exposed the first crack. The archive had revealed the concealment, and now, Anne was walking toward a closed room where politeness would no longer protect either woman from the truth. There were no aides in the room when Princess Anne placed the letter between herself and Camilla. No private secretary could soften the accusation. No courtier could redirect the conversation. Anne remained standing while the Queen Consort sat beside the cold fireplace, staring at Elizabeth's seal. Then came the question that stripped away every ceremonial title between them. Why was a dead woman's message to a child locked inside your box? Anne did not wait for an excuse. She stated exactly where the envelope had been found, when it had been transferred, and how its removal had kept both Charles and George's parents from knowing it existed. The dispatch box, a secure case used for confidential royal documents, had placed Elizabeth's private words under Camilla's control. That mattered, because the letter belonged to a child preparing for a life he had never chosen, and because the Queen had trusted her daughter to protect him from the pressures surrounding that future. Camilla admitted during the private conversation that her office had received the envelope during the confusion following the accession, the formal transfer of the crown to Charles after Elizabeth's death. She insisted the situation was more complicated than Anne believed. Papers had been moved, duties had changed, and the new royal household had been struggling to create order. But the Queen Consort's explanation could not answer the only question that mattered. Why had the letter remained hidden? Anne accused her of allowing George to doubt his own memory. Her anger became deeply personal when she revealed that Elizabeth had specifically named her as the person responsible for delivering the message. The boy had remembered a promise. Camilla had answered that memory with doubt. Camilla rose and finally admitted she had read enough of the letter to understand its warning. Elizabeth feared that future heirs might be influenced by people who presented control as protection. The Queen Consort argued that those words could have turned George against Charles's new court, meaning the advisors and senior figures serving the king, while creating suspicion toward anyone outside the late monarch's closest circle. Anne rejected that defense. She said Camilla had not feared instability. She had feared exclusion. The letter gave William, Catherine, and Anne moral authority around George, while offering the king's wife no meaningful place at all. Camilla reached for the envelope. Anne placed her palm over it and refused to move. The silence between them became a struggle over who had the right to control Elizabeth's legacy. Camilla confessed that decades of judgment had left her terrified of being condemned again, especially by the next generation. Anne answered that fear could explain the decision, but it could not excuse it. Charles, William, and the keeper of the royal archives, see official responsible for safeguarding royal records, had already been summoned to examine the transfer order. The confrontation had exposed Camilla's fear, but fear did not decide royal authority. That power still rested with Charles, and the king would now have to choose between protecting his wife and restoring Elizabeth's promise to George. King Charles entered the library, expecting a family dispute. He found something far more dangerous: a sealed instruction from his mother, an unauthorized archival transfer, and 3 people waiting for him to decide whether loyalty to his wife mattered more than duty to his grandson. Charles read the letter slowly. When he reached Elizabeth's final paragraph, he removed his glasses, placed them beside the page, and remained silent long enough to make Camilla understand that everything had changed. The keeper of the royal archives confirmed that the envelope, handwriting, and seal were authentic. The keeper was the official responsible for protecting and tracking the monarchy's historic records, which meant his documented assessment carried institutional weight. Elizabeth's written instruction was clear. Anne was to deliver the message directly to George when she believed he was ready. The transfer into Camilla's household had bypassed normal procedure, and no record showed approval from Charles, William, or the late Queen's private secretary. Charles looked from the document to his wife. He had defended Camilla through years of hostility, believing their marriage had survived because they refused to let the past dictate their future. Now he faced the possibility that she had concealed his mother's final act of care toward George, the child who would one day inherit everything the family was struggling to preserve. Love pulled him in one direction. Kingship demanded another. William spoke without raising his voice. He told his father that George had not merely been denied a piece of paper. The boy had lost a final act of love from the woman who understood the loneliness of inherited duty better than anyone. The prince's restraint made the accusation heavier. Charles heard not political anger, but a father's pain. The archivist then presented the recovered signature, archival light, a specialist method used to expose damaged or erased writing, revealed authorization from a senior member of Camilla's household. A documented statement from that official confirmed that the order followed a private verbal instruction from the Queen Consort herself. Camilla stopped denying the decision. She admitted that she had ordered the letter delayed, insisting George was too young and the palace too fragile after the accession. She claimed she wanted to prevent Elizabeth's warning from deepening divisions during Charles's first months as king. Yet her explanation could not erase the secrecy. Charles turned toward her and asked why she had never told him. Camilla answered that she feared he would choose his mother's wishes over her judgment. The king held her gaze and quietly replied, "You knew what the right choice was." Anne felt no victory. Watching her brother struggle, she understood that the truth had forced him into the old wound between private love and public duty. Still, he made the decision. Charles restored the letter to Anne, removed Elizabeth's correspondence from Camilla's control, and ordered that George receive the message that night. The king had made his decision, but returning the letter could not erase the concealment, and the first consequences began before George had even broken Elizabeth's seal. By morning, Camilla still possessed her title, her rooms, and her place beside the king, but the atmosphere surrounding her had changed. Staff members chose their words more carefully. Files once sent directly to her office were redirected. Charles left breakfast after only a few minutes. The punishment was not announced through ceremony or proclamation. It appeared through closed folders, unanswered questions, and the unbearable knowledge that trust had been withdrawn before the palace had spoken a single public word. Charles signed the order, transferring oversight of Elizabeth's family papers to Anne and an independent archival custodian, a neutral official appointed to protect documents from private influence. The decision ended Camilla's access to messages intended for the younger heirs. It mattered because royal correspondence was not simply paperwork. Those letters carried family trust, private guidance, and memories that could shape George, Charlotte, and Louis long before any public duty began. William demanded a complete review of every document connected to his children. He wanted to know whether another message had been delayed, redirected, or quietly buried. The prince understood that one hidden envelope could be called a mistake. More than one would reveal a pattern. That possibility made the search deeply personal, because his children needed to believe their family would protect their emotional lives, rather than manage them for political convenience. Camilla sat alone after Charles left, and watched an aide remove the red dispatch box from her desk. She experienced the decision as humiliation carried out behind closed doors. When she asked the king whether he still believed she had acted to protect the household, he did not soften. He told her that good intentions could not repair what secrecy had broken. The monarch looked devastated, but he refused to reverse the order. Anne soon received the first troubling result. The archival review uncovered a draft memorandum recommending that George's contact with her be reduced during constitutional preparations, the private training that would one day teach him how to carry out the duties of the crown. The proposal had never been approved, yet its existence mattered. Elizabeth had named her daughter as the boy's trusted guide, and someone had considered weakening that bond. William read the memorandum and stopped at Camilla's office heading. He folded the page without speaking. Catherine saw his hands trembling before he placed it inside a locked drawer. She understood his fear immediately. The hidden letter might not have been a single act of panic, but part of an effort to control who could influence their son. George sensed the anger and asked why everyone was upset over something written to him. Catherine knelt beside him and explained that adults sometimes mishandle love when fear makes them desperate to control it. The boy listened, then made one request no advisor had expected. He wanted Anne beside him when he opened Elizabeth's letter, but everyone else, including his parents, had to remain outside. The institutional battle had ended with Camilla's authority diminished, yet the emotional meaning of the discovery would be decided in a quiet room where only George, Anne, and Elizabeth's words remained. George did not open the letter in a throne room or beneath the eyes of palace officials. He chose a small sitting room and asked Anne to close the door. For the first time since the discovery, the document was no longer evidence in a royal conflict. It belonged to the boy whose name was written across its front. Anne handed it to him without ceremony, and his fingers paused over the seal his great-grandmother had touched. Anne explained that Elizabeth had written the message while privately considering the pressures George would face as the monarchy moved toward another generation. The crown, meaning the duties and authority carried by the sovereign, could shape every part of his future before he was old enough to choose anything for himself. The letter was meant to be opened only when he began questioning duty, identity, and whether royal responsibility might change the person he wanted to become. George felt wounded that adults had hidden something so personal from him. Yet another fear held him back. What if Elizabeth's words contained demands he was not ready to carry? Anne saw the uncertainty in him and admitted that she felt she had failed by not finding the message sooner. He answered that she had been the only adult who believed his memory without correcting him or making him feel foolish. George finally broke the seal and began reading. Elizabeth's central message was not about titles, ceremony, or power. She warned him never to confuse obedience with goodness, and never to let the institution silence his compassion. The late Queen reminded him that royal duty should serve people, not erase the heart of the person performing it. That mattered because George's greatest danger was not weakness. It was becoming so controlled that he stopped trusting his own conscience. Anne listened as he reached the passage, explaining why Elizabeth had chosen her. The monarch wrote that her daughter understood service without craving the throne, and would speak honestly, even when truth angered the palace. Those words gave Anne no sense of victory. They gave her a responsibility she could no longer avoid. George suddenly stopped reading. Elizabeth had asked him to forgive frightened people without surrendering his judgment. He looked at Anne and quietly asked whether that included Camilla. Anne refused to offer revenge disguised as advice. She told him forgiveness was possible, but trust could return only through truth, responsibility, and changed behavior. Mercy did not mean pretending the betrayal had never happened. George made his decision. He did not want Camilla removed from his life. He wanted her to admit directly that she had hidden the letter and promise never to interfere with his family correspondence again. Royal correspondence meant private messages preserved or delivered through palace channels, and he now understood how easily those channels could be misused. George's response transformed Elizabeth's message from a weapon into a test of character, and soon the entire country would judge whether the palace could follow the example set by its youngest heir. The palace hoped to contain the matter within the family, but the removal of archival authority from Camilla's office triggered questions that silence could not suppress. By sunrise, the hidden letter had become the defining royal story of the day. Broadcasters spoke of Elizabeth's final guidance to the future king. Commentators debated Anne's intervention. And outside Buckingham Palace, ordinary people gathered beneath the gates carrying a message the institution could not ignore. The palace issued a formal statement confirming that a private letter from Elizabeth to George had been incorrectly removed from the royal archives and had now reached its intended recipient. The royal archives were the official collection where the monarchy's historic papers and private records were preserved. The statement avoided naming Camilla, but it confirmed that procedures had changed and Anne had assumed responsibility for the late Queen's personal family correspondence. That mattered because the palace was acknowledging failure without revealing the full betrayal behind it. Camilla watched the coverage alone. Commentators described the concealment as a profound error of judgment, and every careful phrase made her position look more fragile. She had hidden the message, partly to protect her place around George. Instead, that decision had created the very suspicion she feared. The Queen Consort understood that the public was no longer asking only where the letter had been. People were asking what else might have been controlled. Anne rejected every attempt to cast her as the winner. During a private conversation with William, she insisted that the story must remain centered on George and the love Elizabeth had tried to preserve for him. The Princess Royal knew triumph would turn a child's pain into another palace contest. William agreed, but he could not ignore how deeply the country had connected with his son's loss. A major newspaper carried an image of Elizabeth holding young George beneath the headline, "The Letter They Hid." A smaller caption declared, "Anne restores Queen's final promise." Outside Buckingham Palace, Hundreds gathered, and one handwritten sign became the symbol of the day. A grandmother held it beside a child. It read, "Let George hear her words." Then a broadcaster revealed, through a documented palace briefing, that Camilla had requested a private meeting with George. She was not challenging Charles's decision. She wanted to accept responsibility before the boy himself. William refused at first. He feared another carefully managed explanation would place pressure on his son. George listened, then calmly reminded his father that Elizabeth's letter had told him to hear people without surrendering his conscience. The prince saw that the decision had already been made. Anne accompanied George, but promised not to speak for him. Carrying the letter that had divided the household, he entered the room where Camilla was waiting. The country had delivered its judgment in headlines and crowds, but the monarchy's true verdict would be formed in the final private exchange between the woman who hid the letter and the boy who chose how its lesson would be remembered. Camilla did not defend herself when George entered. She did not blame advisors, confused procedures, or the instability of the accession. She looked at the letter in his hands and admitted that she had withheld something that belonged to him. The future king listened without interruption. Anne watched from across the room. In that moment, the fate of their relationship depended not upon rank, but upon whether an adult could accept judgment from the child she had wronged. Camilla explained that Elizabeth's words had made her feel permanently excluded from the monarchy's emotional center. The accession, the formal moment when a new sovereign inherits the crown, had changed her public position, but it had not erased her fear of being judged through the conflicts of the past. She believed George might read the letter and see her only as an outsider, standing between him and the people Elizabeth trusted. Camilla then admitted the deeper truth. Instead of earning George's confidence honestly, she had tried to control when and how he encountered a message that challenged her place within the family. She had called it protection, but fear had guided the decision. The queen consort understood now that guarding her position had cost her the very trust she sought. George answered without cruelty. He told her that hiding the letter had hurt more than anything written inside it. Elizabeth's message had not taught him to hate anyone. The concealment had made him doubt a promise from someone he loved and question whether his own memory could be trusted. For a child already carrying the pressure of a predetermined future, that damage cut deeper than palace politics. Camilla apologized without qualification. She promised never again to interfere with correspondence intended for him or use royal protection as an excuse for personal fear. Royal correspondence meant private family messages managed through official palace channels, and she accepted that those channels could never again become tools of control. George placed the letter between them. He said he would not forget what happened, but he would allow her to prove that the apology meant something. Forgiveness would not erase accountability. It would begin a slower, harder test. Outside the room, Camilla thanked Anne for refusing to remain silent. The Princess Royal replied that defending the crown sometimes meant confronting those standing closest to it. Charles later accepted responsibility for failing to notice the breach within his household, while William promised George that no royal system would ever again separate him from a personal message written by his family. Camilla permanently lost authority over Elizabeth's private archive, yet she remained within the family under clear boundaries. Her relationship with George would be rebuilt through conduct, not title. And so the hidden letter reached its true destination, not merely George's hands, but the conscience of a monarchy that finally understood Elizabeth's last lesson. Authority may be inherited, but trust must always be earned. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.